Hey, LaGrandeLive.tv, thanks so much for joining us this morning. I'm Brent Clapp with Brent Clapp Media Services, the owner and operator of LaGrandeLive.tv. And today we have with us Shamus Lynskey, who is going to talk to us this morning about why we should vote yes on 97. And before we begin, I just want to be sure and mention our sponsors, Marketplace Family Food, Valley Realty, Northwest Furniture and Mattress, and Grand Ron Hospital. Thanks so much, Shamus, for joining us.
Sure. Again, I'm Shamus Lynskey. I'm the executive director of the Oregon Consumer League. And the Oregon Consumer League has been working in Oregon since the late 1960s to educate consumers, to promote ethical and responsible business practices, and also to advocate for consumer protection legislation in the Oregon State Legislature. We got involved with the Yes on 97 campaign because we saw that, Oregon consumers, Oregon taxpayers are shouldering more than their fair share of the burden in the state. And Measure 97 really levels that playing field by asking large corporations to step up and pay their fair share, and to direct those funds to where the state needs it most: education, healthcare, and senior services.
Okay, so give me a little bit of an understanding of what the Oregon Consumer League does when it's not involved in measures like this.
Sure. I've been involved for a little over a year now, and pretty small little nonprofit, even though we've been around for a long time. Right now, we've been working on educating consumers on, various consumer scams, informing them about things like the Wells Fargo massive consumer fraud. Right now, we're developing a couple of workshops, one aimed at college students to help them avoid debt traps for students, and also as they head out of college, how to responsibly monitor their student loan debt. And then we're also working on one aimed at seniors and how to avoid financial scams that are aimed at seniors.
Okay, and so those are all really good things. Tell me how 97 is connected to those things you normally do.
Well, it's connected because a lot of Oregon consumers are consumers of education. They're consumers of healthcare, and they're consumers of senior services. A lot of our constituency are seniors. And so Measure 97, right now, Oregon consumers aren't getting, the funding they need to have a quality education system. Quality education model, which is the Oregon Department of Education's sort of very detailed blueprint on how we should be getting educational services in the state, is over $2 billion in the hole.
Okay.
And then the Oregon Health Authority, they just released their detailed budget, and they're almost a billion with a B, $1.5 billion shy of providing their just basic services, which include senior services like Oregon's model community and in-home healthcare system or service.
Okay. So tell me, so were you involved, or was your organization involved in the beginning of 97 and the authoring of that? Is that something you were involved in from beginning?
No, we didn't really get involved until this summer. We were working on, Comcast was actually trying to get a tax break earlier this year on a service that they didn't really offer in Oregon.
Okay.
They had this sort of ghost, we called it a ghost service. They were pretending to offer this high-speed internet in order to get this new tax break. And they currently owe over $120 million in back taxes that they've been fighting in the state. So we were involved in making sure that they didn't get that tax break for this service they didn't really offer. And that's when we were approached by the Yes on 97 campaign to take a look at Measure 97, and we very quickly and enthusiastically endorsed.
Okay. And so then how do you get paid? How does your organization get paid? And is there, because that's one of the things I want to talk about, is the funding of both sides of the campaign. And that is, so do you receive, are you hired by them, or is that something you just took on your own?
No, the Oregon Consumer League is just a small nonprofit. We get donations from some organizations, from some individuals. It's very little.
Okay.
I do nonprofit consulting for the Oregon Consumer League. I've been doing it for, like I said, since about May of last year. And I also worked with another nonprofit. So I do nonprofit work.
Good. Okay. So let's talk about 97. Tell me why that is a good thing for the state of Oregon.
Sure. So let's start with the fact that Oregon's dead last in corporate taxes. There are a few studies, Ernst & Young, the Anderson Economic Group, both put Oregon in dead last in overall corporate tax burden. And, if you look at the history of this, in the mid-1970s, corporations were paying closer to 20 cents on every tax dollar collected. Mm-hmm. Today, that's less than 7 cents. So,
and I don't mean to interrupt you, but
sure.
But tell me why it's good. I mean, I understand that might not be the fair share of corporations paying compared to other states, but tell me why it's a good thing. As a voter, why would I vote for that?
Well, that's what I was leading to.
Sorry.
It's a good thing because that means that you and I and small businesses are making up that difference.
Okay.
So the tax burden is on us, and that's just not fair. And on top of that, there's not enough revenue, like I said, to fund that quality education model. We're third worst graduation rate in the country. Okay. And there's not enough money to fund the Oregon Health Authority's budget for just maintaining services right now, $1.5 billion in the hole. So it's a good thing because it raises money from those who aren't currently paying their fair share, and it directs it to those three areas where we need it most: education, healthcare, and senior services.
Okay. So, I mean, there's both sides are spending a ton of money. I mean, I got 2 flyers on the same day at my home from Yes on 97 and No on 97. So rather than me debate with you what the other side is saying, why don't you tell me what the people against it are saying about it, and would you rebut that? Why is that wrong?
Sure. And I will say, a lot of money has been raised, but the no side has raised a record amount, $23 million, 2/3 of which comes from out of state. And what I find ironic is that these huge corporations like Comcast, Wells Fargo, BP, Shell Oil, they're funding a message that says that this is not good for consumers. And I just kind of find that laughable coming from those corporations. I mean, I don't think any of your viewers thinks Comcast has their best interest in mind. I don't know that I necessarily want to make their argument for them. I mean, if you have specific questions about what the no side is saying, I can address those. But
so I guess let's.
For instance,
okay.
that whole they want to look out for consumers is just kind of ridiculous because, Measure 97 is focused on C corporations that make over $25 million in Oregon sales, right?
Okay.
There are only 1,000 of those companies doing business in Oregon. That's less than 1%. In Oregon. So it's about a quarter of 1%. Just a very small sliver of businesses fall into that category.
Okay.
And a large percentage of those are headquartered out of state. So these are huge, mostly 82% are national and international corporations. And those businesses, they have national and zone pricing models. They're corporations like Kroger, like Walmart, like Costco. And if you look at those businesses, they have very stable pricing models across the country, or in particular areas of the country. And they don't adjust those prices based on what they're paying in taxes in each state. They're really charging as much as they already can in the markets they're doing. The Oregon Consumer League studied this. We looked at 5 of these big C corporations that would be affected by 97. and we discovered that that's true. They have remarkably similar pricing across the country. But it's not. I mean, obviously, we're proponents of this. So you don't, people might be suspect. I don't know why, but they might think that we're skewing the numbers. But the Associated Oregon Industries agrees. They tweeted back in September that if you think grocery stores can raise prices if Measure 97 passes, think again. And they linked to an article that showed that it's competition, not individual state taxes that drive prices in that industry. The other side likes to say, oh, healthcare costs might go up. Well, my health insurance rate has gone up almost every year. There hasn't been a tax increase every year. That's clearly, there's no correlation there.
Okay.
Prescription drugs, these huge pharmaceutical companies, they're charging as much as they possibly can. Look at EpiPen. They just raised the price earlier this year, 500%. They didn't experience a 500% increase. Most hospitals in the state, the vast majority of them, 90-some% of the hospitals in the state are nonprofits. They're not C corporations. They're not touched by 97. So it's just preposterous for them to suggest that. And it's a scare tactic because they really want to make people second guess whether or not holding these large corporations accountable and directing it towards education and healthcare and senior services is going to be good for them. And, all these nonpartisan groups that really care about Oregonians, that work for Oregonians every day, nurses, teachers, the League of Women Voters, the PTA of Oregon, Children First, the Oregon Consumer League, Main Street Alliance, the small businesses. We have close to 90 economists. They all agree that Measure 97 balances the playing field and raises the necessary revenue we need for these three important areas. So to believe the scare tactics of Comcast and Shell Oil or Standard Insurance is just, I think it's disingenuous.
Okay. So let's back up just a little bit. Clearly, you mentioned several organizations who are supporting financially the no on 97. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, but I did quite a bit of research and I could not find who clearly was financially supporting yes on 97. So can you clear that? Who's paying? I mean, there's a tremendous amount of money being spent on advertising on both sides. Clearly, we knew who's opposed to it. So who's paying for the advertising for yes on 97 and why and what are they getting out of it? Because I'm in a small business. I understand that I'm not going to invest in something unless there's a return. And people aren't going to spend millions of dollars just because it's a good thing to do. And researchers and economists don't have a lot of money to just shell out. So somebody is supporting it, and I'm interested in knowing who and why.
Sure. I'm surprised you couldn't find it because it's in the same place as who's funding the no side. If you just go to the Secretary of State's website, you can see who's funding. And it's teachers, it's nurses, it's firefighters, it's it's the workers who are on the front lines of our education system, of our healthcare system, of taking care of our seniors, who are seeing firsthand the need for this. Those are the folks who are primarily funding the yes side. We've also had,
But I know teachers, and I know they're not reaching into their own pocket and giving it out. So is that the unions the unions that are representing them, or?
Well, that's exactly how they make their voice heard. Yeah.
Okay. So then the unions of these organizations are the ones that are primarily funding the yes on 97.
Yeah, that's why teachers do that. That's why nurses do that, because they know that collectively their voice is much louder and much more powerfully heard.
Okay. So then what do the unions get out of supporting that? And I know that, that seems like an obvious thing to say. Well, they're supporting the teachers that are supporting it, but not there's a lot of teachers, particularly that are in the more conservative area like us. They're a part of a union because it's required by them to do so, but they're not necessarily big union people. So
But
what
they
I
are
really
sitting
need
in a
is a
classroom
union
with
answer,
these-
not necessarily a
Sure.
teacher error.
But they're sitting in a classroom with the third largest class size in the entire nation.
Okay.
So by passing Measure 97, the state will have the revenue to be able to hire the teachers it needs. You can
Okay.
hire thousands of teachers and reduce class sizes. And you can hire the support staff that can help with the other things that lead to having the third worst graduation rate in the country. I mean, this is going to help them be able to better reach their students. I mean, I don't know if you have school-age kids. I have a 9-year-old. He's going to be 10 in a couple of weeks, and we're having a birthday party, and he's going to have 10 of his buddies over, right? And it's going to be a madhouse. It's going to be insane.
Sure. Yeah.
With 10
I've been
of them,
there.
right? Now imagine 35 of those, and trying to connect with them one-on-one to teach them. It's, that's how these kids are falling through the cracks. That's
Right.
That's
my first wife, I was married to a teacher for 25 years. So I get it and I understand. I guess the problem one of the issues that I have is that, I agree with you. We cannot depend on Comcast to have our best interest in mind. But on the same hand, I think that unions that have become institutionalized fall on that same category. And now, maybe whether we agree or not, in the minds of many people, it's the same thing. The union, or whatever the case might be, at some point they become interested in their own survival rather than the people that they're representing. And so, from my perspective, that's one of the things that when somebody uses a public union to defend an action that's going to cost them money, and they say, yeah, these evil corporations, they're not after your best interest. Well, I kind of need some convincing that the union is. Now, I was married to a teacher. I know the teacher was. I know the principal. I can walk down to the staff and I can meet the superintendent of schools. I know he cares about kids. And I know these local teachers do. But sometimes the unions that represent them get way disconnected from the people they're representing. So we don't need to go into that, but that's
yeah.
I
said, I'm with the Oregon Consumer League, but I've been working with volunteers and staff from the PTA, with volunteers and staff from Children First, and with teachers to go around and talk about this measure. And I can tell you, it's because they see the need.
Okay.
Measure 5 passed in 1990, and while lowering and capping property taxes definitely had some benefits in helping Oregonians, making home ownership more affordable for a lot of Oregonians, it totally took away a huge chunk of the funding for the schools. And at the time, even the proponents of that measure were talking about finding, quote unquote, replacement revenue for the funds lost. It's been 26 years. That's a long time to go without any solution, because there hasn't been one. They have not replaced that revenue. And I saw an economist for the state put on a slideshow about about this measure, and they had on a scale, they had this slide, and it was like Measure 5 on this side of the scale and Measure 97 on this side of the scale, and they sort of balanced out, and that's what's being addressed here.
Okay. And I got to tell you, I appreciate teachers, and when I interviewed Greg Barreto on this exact topic, and he is opposed to it, the one things I pushed him on was, well, then what is the solution? What is the solution? Because whether you're pro or for 97, we all understand that there's an issue and it needs to be dealt with and somehow. So, at the end of the day, I'm just a person who I understand there needs to be some solutions in all of this. We
Right.
can talk in the theoretical range all we want, but at the end of the day, it's got to come to something concrete. So one of the things that the people against it saying, well, yeah, it's for education or it's for this or for that, but there's no limits on how the legislature can spend it. And is that true, and how would you respond to that?
Well, I would respond that, Section 3 of the measure very clearly designates it to early childhood education, K through 12 education, healthcare, and senior services. I would also say that the current Oregon state budget is 80% spent in those three areas. So that's clearly where the money is needed. That's where it's being spent, and that's where this measure directs it. And then, like I said earlier, the quality education model is $2-point-something billion in the whole of just being able to provide adequate educational services. And then the Oregon Health Authority is close to $1.5 billion in the whole of their very detailed budget of just providing current services. And that's not even addressing the fact that, in the next 15 years, the senior population of Oregon is supposed to double.
Okay.
So, it's very clear that that's where the money's being spent, that's where the measure directs it, and that's where it's needed.
Okay. So let's go back to the corporations and paying their fair share and so on and so forth. So the Legislative Review Office has said that this measure is going to affect us all about $600 per capita. So do you agree with that? And okay. And
I don't.
Okay.
So if you look closely at that report, they use the same model they use to forecast revenue and such, and it didn't have a mechanism for just zeroing in on C corporations that make over 25 million in Oregon sales. So they generalized it across all companies doing no matter what their sales are.
Okay.
Now, when you spread something out across all businesses like that, then all of them are being hit equally, and I suppose you could expect to see an increase in costs. But that's not what this measure does. And when we raised this point, the author of that study, Paul Warner, he said in an article in the Salem Statesman Journal, quote, "That's a fair criticism." He also said, and I have the quote, where is it? The report itself says, Measure 97 only modestly affects the real economy. It's important to note that these results do not indicate Measure 97 will trigger a decline in Oregon's current economic activity. And with their modeling, which again didn't model Measure 97, it generalized it across all levels of businesses. But even with that modeling, it says, quote, it'll have, it affects the growth in employment, income, and population in each case by less than 1% over the next 5 years. So, even if you just take it at its face, it's not dire. It says that this is not going to be disastrous. It's not going to trigger, quote, a decline in Oregon's activity. It says it's going to be less than 1%. And again, that's when they model it across everything, not just the 1,000 C corps that will be affected by this. So,
okay, so then what number do you agree with that it will cost per capita in the state of Oregon?
0.
So and how does that? I don't understand how that works. So you're proposing that it's going to all of these corporations who, so you're really saying that it's not going to cost me as a consumer a dime. Nobody's going to raise any of my insurance, what it costs for me to do stuff.
They've already announced your insurance is going up. Measure 97 hasn't passed yet.
No, I'm talking about my auto insurance, my what I'm just I mean that is very difficult for me to get my head around. You really
Sure.
believe it's not going to cost me anything?
You can look at the costs. So again, looking at the retail market, the large C corporations that are affected by this, again, they have consistent pricing pretty much across the country. There are variations based on, transportation costs or availability of resources.
But you're saying by that is that it's going to cost them more money to do business, and they're not going to pass it on to me because competition has set their prices. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. So I have a grocery store just moved in next door to us here. We share a building with them. Small grocery store. They're, they. How it won't affect them at all. Now they clearly don't make more than $25 million in a given year, but I mean, I'm sure they buy paper towels from Scott Paper Towels. I'm sure they buy, something. So
sure.
and any grocery store's margin is very small anyhow. How is it not going to affect them? So I mean, if it doesn't affect them, then their choice is, I can't be in business anymore. I mean, you understand what I'm saying? So you're saying that, yeah, corporations are going to pay more money. They might pass that down to a small grocery store locally, but since competition is designating the prices that they can charge, their profit is going to be less, and eventually they may not be in business.
But you understand that those large suppliers that they're buying from sell across the country and are paying higher taxes in every other state in the nation. And they're not basing their price in each state on how much they're paying.
All of that is good, but what does it have to do with me and I mean, we can talk all day about how, compared to other states, corporations pay less, but what I really want to know, and what I really want to know in Eastern Oregon, is why should I vote yes? And is it going to affect me in a negative way?
You should vote yes because you're already being affected in a negative way. Because corporations pay less than 7 cents for every dollar collected in Oregon, you're paying the difference. You're paying the difference in the unequal tax system in Oregon already.
Okay.
And what Measure 97 does is it addresses those large C corporations that are mostly dealing nationally, and it asks them to pay their fair share, and it directs it to education, senior services, and healthcare, services that you at some point in your life are going to need to access, and right now are woefully underfunded.
Okay, so for an individual person who has kids going to school and are going to benefit potentially from those funds being passed down, I can see that. Why would any business vote to have their cost of doing business increased?
I'm going to need to go in a second, but I'll answer that.
Okay.
We have a lot of small businesses. Oregon's a small business state.
Absolutely.
And those small businesses are already paying more than these large C corporations. Many of these small businesses are very much in favor of Measure 97 because they know it's going to level the playing field. So that's why they would vote yes for Measure 97.
No, but it's going to, I mean, ultimately it will increase, maybe not, I mean, it will increase my business personally. It will increase my cost of doing business, whether it be in fuel or insurance. They have a process there where they have to raise prices or whatever. I mean, the reality is in our life, we're talking via Skype. That's a big corporation. So the reality is our life is we benefit, all of us do, from big organizations. So, well, I appreciate you taking the time. Do you have anything else you want to say? Any closing words?
I would just say, look, Measure 97 it's just taking the existing tax code and it's just asking those large C corporations making over 25 in Oregon sales to pay their fair share. And it directs it where we need it most: education, healthcare, and senior services. And when you're filling out that ballot, look at who's asking you to vote yes and who's asking you to vote no. And the folks asking you to vote yes are the folks who take care of Oregonians and have for decades. And the people asking you to vote no are, people like Comcast who just look at you and see dollar signs. So I'd say vote yes on Measure 97.
All right. Well, thanks a bunch, LaGrandeLive.tv, for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to have Shamus with us. And before we go, I just want to be sure and mention our sponsors: Marketplace Family Foods, Valley Realty, Northwest Furniture and Mattress, and Grand Ron Hospital. Have a great day.